Hello again. Welcome to another edition of the Brattlecast. Not just another edition. I'm Jordan Rich, by the way. This is number 200, Mr. Wow. Ken Gloss. 200 episodes.
Well, we're persistent, that's for sure.
We're going to keep doing it till we get it right, I think.
Yeah, well, keep doing it, but it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I point out with books, letters, documents, so every one of those was done because somebody was interested in it. And sometimes you have to really dig and convince yourself it's interesting, but a lot of times it's very obvious or it gets you thinking, and that's as much fun as anything else.
Well, there's a place and a location and a time in Boston coming up very soon from the time we're recording this that you want to talk about. We've talked about it in the past. It's the most exciting book fair you can imagine, November 8th through the 10th at the Hynes Auditorium here in Boston. So,
well, one of the reasons I want to do it is I encourage people, I assume people who are listening to this podcast like books and related items. This is a fair that it's about 100-plus dealers come from literally all over the world, and they show their books, their autographs, and it might be children's books, it might be cookbooks, science books, first editions, or someone might be general and have huge old atlases, maybe books from the 1400s or even before that done by the monks with illustrations, or maybe a letter of George Washington or Albert Einstein, or something more recent, first editions of Harry Potter, letters of people looking at social change, LGBTQ+, women's issues, and just about everything you can think of. There are people who at that show will have photographs. I mean, there was one dealer there, one of the ones that I really remember. It wasn't the most valuable things, but this was last year's show. I was talking to one of the photographic dealers, and she saw a photograph that we had, and she said, "This is perfect." And I didn't think it was all that good. And she said, "Well, I have someone who collects photographs that have 7 people in them."
Well, that's her thing.
That's her thing. Well, she's the dealer, but the collector, that's the thing.
That's their
they
thing.
collect
7 people.
And this photograph happened to have 7 people in them. So you can go from what to you can touch a letter of George Washington.
You don't think that woman had any connection to Snow White, did you? Possible.
Maybe that's where she got it started. So what I'm trying to say at this fair, you don't have to be a big-time collector, although some of the collectors who are really avid collectors, they'll get who is coming to the fair, they'll get the booths they're going to be in. They'll literally map out when the door opens where they're going to run to first because they want to see if there's something that they want and desire. And that's a lot of the Friday night. But then on Saturday and Sunday, it's a little quieter, and people can just wander and go from booth to booth. And you might start out saying, boy, I want to collect Alice in Wonderland books. And by the time you finish, you might be very, very interested in old science or other authors of children's books. And one of the things that I always say about going to these shows, almost everybody who is in this business, I won't say 100%, but almost everybody who's in it love what they do, like what they do. And if you go to a library or a museum, you can look at the glass cases and see things and so on. You can come to a book fair like this and you can say, "Can I see that?" They'll hand it out to you, hold it, turn pages. If you ask them questions about it, problem isn't getting an answer. It's getting them to stop answering.
Right.
There's also an effort because there are a lot of things that are very expensive. I mean, there are books going to be at this fair that will run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But there's a thing called discovery, and a lot of the dealers who participate in this have books $100 and under. Mm-hmm. And we even try to bring 25 and 10 so that people, if they go and they see something, they can at least say, well, we got something. And maybe their kids sometimes come along, and maybe they'll be the future collector who's buying the $100,000.
Now, you've done this show many, many years running.
Well, it's
right?
I'm pretty sure it's the 46th year, and I've been on the committee for 47 because we had to have a committee to start to get the first one. Now, I will say that I was the chairperson for about 25 years of it. But now one of the younger people in the organization is the chair. And it's not so much that I can't do it, but having someone a little younger, their perspective is different. And a lot of times I have gone into houses or places where people have collected books, but you can tell it's the past generation. And the newer generation and the newer collectors might be collecting people with 7 people in a photograph, but they also, a lot of the things that stand out to them are not necessarily what I grew up with. Or they might say to me, oh, I'll say, this is great. There's a Dick and Jane, and it's the original artwork for Dick and Jane. And they'll go, yeah, that's how old you are.
That's the spot run.
So we're definitely trying to get more younger and change. And another thing that's happened is because of the internet, a lot of the dealers are dealing in ephemeral items, paper that advertising, maybe journals, maybe letters and diaries of things that are unique, one of a kind. And actually, one of the things we're going to bring this year that I have no idea how well it will do, I have no idea whether it will work, but I have a daughter who lives in Kenya who, by the way, I'm going to see soon with a new grandchild. But last time we went to an artist studio. Now, an artist studio in Kenya can look completely different than what you'd think artist studios look like. It was, a lot of the artists are literally almost starving artists. But I liked one artist's work particularly. He did women. And I said, can you do a series of 10 not photographs, but paintings? I love your style, but have books in every one of them? And he said, sure. He was very happy to get the commission. And we got them sent here, and I'm very curious to see how that goes over. Now, there's a huge interest in African-American literature, art, collecting, anything to do with African-American. These are not African-American artists. This is African art.
Yeah.
And if it works well, then I'll be able to go back to that studio when I go on the trip and maybe talk to some of the other artists and say, do something with books in it. People love it.
Now, the international aspect has
Yes.
obviously, I would imagine, grown over the years. So there are representatives from all over the world now?
Well, we've had dealers from Australia, from Great Britain, from the Netherlands, from South America. Not too many this time coming from Russia. We've had them in the past.
I can understand
so
that
that changes. But yeah, and also from the all over the United States, and everybody. There are generalists like me, but everybody has a specialty. There's also a series of speakers. For instance, there's Ruth Rogers, who is the head of special collections at Wellesley College. And one of the things that I think, even for new collectors, will be great is she's talking about why Wellesley collects what they collect. Is it going to be used? Do people care? Does it give insight that professors can use in their teaching? How fragile are things? How much do we have or don't have? I know one of the things that they'd love to get would be a set of, we talk about magazines, of Ebony magazine to show how the African Americans were. So that's one. And the person who is presenting and introducing, I will say, is a woman named Joyce, who I happen to be married to, but who also happened to grow up with Ruth in Winthrop.
Very good.
But then there's a woman talking about medieval book collectors, women medieval book collectors. Another man talking about collecting Melville. And then I get to do one introduction to a man named Dick Johnson, who is the head of the Sports Museum.
I know Richard very well. He's a dear friend.
I've known him for years.
Yes.
But I love sports, and I love sports collectibles. I know one year, one of my favorite books that I had at the book fair is, there's a book called The American Pastime by Spalding. It was done in 1911. It has a really nice sort of an Uncle Sam holding a baseball bat, beautiful if it's in good condition. But this one, when you opened it up, was inscribed from Spalding to George Wright. George Wright played baseball for the Red Sox. Spalding played for the Red Sox. They're both in the Hall of Fame. So it's one Hall of Famer inscribing it to another, and they both started sporting goods companies. Spalding, sporting goods,
Obviously.
Wright Ditson, sporting goods.
Wow.
They're both from Boston, but I don't know that Dick will talk about that, but he's going to be talking about how to collect sports on a budget. You don't have to spend millions of dollars to get everything. So there'll be those talks that go along with, you can just browse up and down. My advice usually, if you're going to go to the show, is if you're not a specific collector, walk up and down the aisles, see what's there, make a little note, and then go back and say, this is one I want to see and that's one I want to see. And maybe it sparks a few people into becoming collectors.
We do, of course, have a little inside baseball, if I can use that term, method of getting, shall we say, a pass on a particular Friday night.
Well, I would say maybe I shouldn't say this.
Oh, go.
But a number of years ago, shows like this, it always aggravated me when you had to pay to go into a show to buy things. Mm-hmm. But my daughter, who was in her early 30s at the time, said to me, you know, a bunch of our friends, now she could get free tickets. So, I mean, but she said, you know, friends of ours, if you weren't there, if we were going to go out to dinner or have a drink on Saturday at 4 o'clock, 4 or 5, we might love to go to a book show like this if we're in the area, but we're not going to pay $10 or $15 to go in for half an hour, and so on. Mm-hmm. And it made me think, why charge an admission charge? Get people in the door, especially people who might be hesitant to go. But I said, though we have to charge $25 for the opening night. And the reason for that is a lot of dealers like sending free passes to their best customers. And you can't send a free pass as a special item to your customer on Friday night if it's free.
That's true.
So,
good point.
So we actually kept the 20. But if someone were to contact me and say, gee, I'd like a couple of passes to the fair on Friday night, we've got plenty to give to free to special customers.
Folks, I know a guy who knows a guy. I'm sitting across from the guy. But I think it's important to give the website, which I have here, www.ilab.org, and then you'll find Boston.
Or ABAA. ILA, there are two organizations.
Okay.
The ILAB is the international organization.
Okay.
The ABAA is the American Booksellers Association, and they're really the sponsoring one. If you Google that, that's the first thing that you don't need the American Air Barriers Association, which will come up second. And on their website, we'll have all the details, the information. But if anyone wants to just get in touch with me and email and ask and have suggestions, ideas, whatever. It's a great weekend. You can go to the bookstores in Boston. Also, there's a what they call a shadow fair on Saturday across the street where some dealers who aren't in the organization go. There's exhibits around the city of some of the libraries have wonderful exhibits of books that week, particularly the BPL, Harvard, and so on. So there's a lot going on, and but just come. It's a wonderful time to be in Boston. You can go to this fair, think you're not going to be liking it, and go through and go, wow, look at that. That's amazing. And then say, can you tell me more about it? Can I hold it? Can I touch it? I guess if you have the money, you can buy it too and take it home with you.
And the cherry on top is you get a chance to meet the star of the Brattlecast, Ken Gloss. I might even show up.
Well, I would say that the star of it would be you get to meet Joyce, my wife.
Well, that's...
I mean, that's... no, but also the other people who work for us. And like I say, I remember one of my big moments of being at a fair. This was a number of years ago. We had a booth in the middle of a row. Mm-hmm. At one end of the row was Doris Goodwin. At the other end of the row was David McCullough. They saw each other. They sort of walked I won't say they ran, but they walked right in front of our booth. They hugged. And
History in the making.
So you never know who's going to be at the show or what people or characters, and that will be a lot of fun.
Good
too.
deal. Good deal. He's Ken Gloss. I'm Jordan Rich. And as always, we appreciate the enthusiasm you have and the knowledge you have. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and come to the book fair. And if you want, Friday night passes.